there are situations where we've got top performers, and because they're top performers, they're kind of left in that performance zone forever because they do it, right? They don't give you
Yes.
any headache. As a leader, the good people, they just do it. They come in, they do a great job, they go home, amazing. Those are the people also that you need to watch, because very quickly they could become a little bit isolated and not loved. Again, you can contract with them. Maybe once a quarter, you do a robust coaching conversation. And that coaching conversation will sound very different to somebody you're trying to develop. It might sound like, where to next? How are you going to get there? It might be about their career development. It might be about they want to try new things and stretch.
Welcome to Manager, a podcast about the experiences of people leaders and how we can enable them to lead engaged, healthy, and high-performing teams. I'm Kamaria Scott, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join us as we learn, lead, and succeed together.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Manager. One of the things that often goes unsaid is that our role as people leaders is really to bring out the best in each person that works for us. At times that can seem daunting because they're also unique and different, but absolutely requires us to take an approach that understands each one of them and helps them to really think about what is going to help them reach their full potential. In this episode, I am so excited to welcome my guest, Ramona Henfield, who has a unique approach to making sure that everyone on her team reaches their full potential. Ramona, welcome to the episode.
Hello, and thank you so much for inviting me. Such a pleasure to be with you, Kamaria.
Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, your background, what you do every day.
What do I do every day? Wow, exciting. So I have been in the corporate world for precisely 27 years now, based in the UK, and really, really passionate about people, growing people, helping people achieve their potential. Currently, I'm leading an HR operations team. It's a global team. I've got 20 people across the different geographies. My hobby is definitely coaching. I am absolutely fascinated by human behavior. I am fascinated by why do people behave in a certain way, what words they use, what their body language is. And I truly believe that nobody gets up in the morning wanting to not do a great job. Given a chance, I think people can flourish, people can grow, people can develop. And I've been blessed to have people around me that have given me a chance, including being on your podcast. So,
Well, I'm glad we're able to give you a chance to share so much of your wisdom with other people. And I think what was interesting to me as we started thinking about this episode was what you just said about that belief that people want to be good at their jobs. And that's been something that has driven me too, like to be an IR psychologist. I've always started with, I think people really do want to be good at their jobs. I think there's very few people that wake up every morning and go, I'd like to be terrible at my job today. Because we
or
get
slack or not know the answer.
Yes. It's interesting because I think having that perspective shapes how we approach our roles as well.
Yeah.
Because when you have that belief, I would imagine you position yourself as somebody who's enabling that instead of just managing performance, as we often talk about.
And we'll talk about the big difference between helping people to grow and managing performance, because I think they're different things. They intersect at some point, but they're different playgrounds.
It's so interesting that you start off with the philosophy that people want to do good work. And I think that approach is maybe how we help them to be successful. I know in my experience, the way that we've helped people is to take on a coaching perspective. I'm wondering if that's something that helps you as well with helping people to get to where they want to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what helps me is to start by thinking everybody has a positive intent, number one. I have a positive intent. Everything I do with a positive intent. Everybody I interact with has a positive intent, right? Whether right or wrong, I choose that attitude. The second thing I look at is, instead of looking at what is wrong with people, or what is broken, or what is a weakness, let me first understand, what are people great at?
Mm-hmm.
What do they love doing? What do they enjoy doing? What previous successes have they had that you can start building on? Because no matter what we say, humans like to be liked. Humans like to be successful. Humans like to have other humans thanking them for what they do. So I start my coaching with that. What do you enjoy? Let's talk about it. Talk me through some examples where you have succeeded. What did you do? How did you do it? And what can you take into a different situation, whatever situation we're talking about? And the final thing I'm going to say, when I think of a coach, what is a coach? A coach is a facilitator. It's like, let's pretend we drive a car and you've got the driver. That is your person. The coach is the person in the passenger seat that maybe now and again gives some direction, gives some guidance to the driver, but the driver will drive that car to the destination. The coach is not the driver. The coach is not the doing. The coach is not, let me take control. The driver is doing all of that, but the coach is there for some guidance, for facilitating some of the thinking that needs to happen during that journey.
What's so interesting about that is we do encourage leaders to learn how to coach, to be good coaches. So I'm hearing you kind of give us why is this important for the team members? Why might it also benefit managers, people leaders? What do they get out of this conversation?
So I am a great believer that having the title of a leader doesn't mean you have all the answers. You being the facilitator in that conversation will probably help you to learn a couple of things, as well as your coachee to come up by themselves to a solution, to an idea, to a way forward. So it's a win-win situation. You empower them, but also you learn from that conversation. And you grow, yes, you will grow in different directions, but you grow together, because it is about give and take.
It is. And I do hope that a lot of people recognize that coaching, it really is that two-way street. There is really benefit to you as a people leader if you can learn how to do that, because your team will grow and you help them figure out not necessarily what to do, but how to think about what to do.
Spot on. Over the years, and I've been coaching for a long, long time, for many, many years, being a coach or sitting in the coach seat has helped me to understand patience, to understand listening. And I mean truly active listening, where I am not listening because I want to have the next question prepared. Is listening for me to truly understand what is going on in that world of my coachee. And it's helped me to a certain extent to kind of let go. It's not about me. It's not about my idea. It's not about what I think. It's about, how do I empower the other person, my team, my coachee, whoever I talk to own whatever solution they're talking about, whatever the next step is. And it's such a fulfilling, liberating feeling when you get to the end of a conversation, the end of a coaching session, and they go, do you know what? I feel different, or there's been a light bulb moment. And if that person takes one thing from that coaching session, your job is done, because you build on it and you build on it.
Yeah, that for me is a joy too. That aha moment that happens somewhere in the conversation where they have pushed past some belief or they figure out a next step. For me, helping them to get unstuck is the greatest joy of being a coach, not necessarily pointing answer at them, but just letting them talk it through until they reach that moment of clarity about where they are and what they want to do next. They get to own those decisions because you haven't made it for them. You're facilitating that thought process. I want to bring that back to performance and them being their best selves.
Yeah. So I was talking to you about the two different zones or two different playgrounds. I think throughout our lives, personal and professional lives, we are playing in between those two zones, the development, the growth zone, and the performance zone. One can't be without the other, but they are parallel. And the reason I'm saying they're parallel is because of in the growth development zone, you have the freedom to learn, grow, make mistakes, and learn from the mistakes. You're safe. There is that safety that is going to get you ready to step into the performance zone. So that's why the coach plays a critical role, helping that person, that individual to grow, develop, to be able to move into the performance zone. And then in the performance zone, you've got goals, objectives, you achieve, you perform, right? And then you come back. There will be times in your performance zone where you get stuck. And then you come back in your coaching, in your development, in your growth zone. Now, what I see happening very, very often, including myself, is that we left in the performance zone without ever entering the development zone. And that's where leaders come into their own, because when you've got a team, you need to help your team get the right balance between performance and development.
How does a leader know when someone on their team should be in each zone or when they're in each zone? What should they be looking for in relation to a project or a task that you're like, okay, this person's developing, this person's performing, or like you said, they've been in performance for too long. What am I seeing that tells me I need to help them shift back?
Love that question. First of all, you look at how long has that person been in their role for? Because somebody at the beginning of their career, the beginning of their role, you would expect them to be more into that development growth zone. But let's pretend that, you know, this member of staff, this team member has been there for years. A great leader will have touch points with that person regularly, weekly basis, monthly basis, whatever you choose, but you will notice changes in behavior, in performance. Sometimes there's subtle dips in performance. That is where you might have a one-to-one conversation where you're going, hey, tell me how things are going. And you truly pay attention to the words they're using and what they're telling you. That would be the moment where you go, okay, maybe we need to go into the learning zone, the growth zone, into the development zone. Maybe instead of talking about you haven't achieved your goals or this is slipping, we're talking about how are you going to get there? The coaching that you need to get there. What are the tools that you're going to use to get there? And what guidance do you need? And maybe what support do you need? Each person is very, very different. As a leader, you need to mold your style based on the type of people you've got in your team. So I'm not going to give you a recipe. My only recipe is watch. As a leader, you need to watch. You need to listen for the most subtle signals. Give that person an opportunity to have some airtime with you, create the space, because they will open up if you ask the right questions. Let me give you an example. I have situations where we would jump on a virtual call and certain people don't put their cameras on. People that maybe would have put their cameras on previously. So immediately, I will bring that topic into our next one-to-one. Sometimes that simple thing could be a very good camouflage for something else.
What I'm hearing you say is, and I wholeheartedly agree, everybody on your team is different. So everyone's performance zone is different. I used to have a joke on my team where I'd be like, I speak the language of everybody on my team. I speak Adam, I speak Tracy. They are all different. I know what high performance looks like in each of them. To your point, the signs of them starting to slip look different because it might be they're not on camera, or they don't speak up the way they normally would, or I haven't heard from somebody and I need to go check on them, but knowing them enough to know this person, there's something happening, that their performance zone is not working. So what is supposed to happen in each zone? If someone is in a growth zone, how are we supposed to help them navigate? And if they're in a performance zone, how are we supposed to help them navigate?
So in the growth development zone, you would have coaching sessions, you will have learning modules, you will have, sometimes you get some training depending on whatever you're contracting in those coaching sessions. You've got people that might decide they need a mentor, buddy, or resources to help them perform. And then you move into the performance zone, and that is where you start measuring. You've got goals, you've got objectives. What is your performance against? So that becomes very black and white. Those are your goals. This is your performance against the goals. Are you on track? Are you off track? And that will then trigger, do they need to move into the development zone at any point because their goals are not tracking, right? That's one example. But there are situations where we've got top performers, and because they're top performers, they're kind of left in that performance zone forever because they do it, right? They don't give you any headache. As a leader, the good people, they just do it. They come in, they do a great job, they go home, amazing. Those are the people also that you need to watch, because very quickly they could become a little bit isolated and not loved. Again, you can contract with them. Maybe once a quarter, you do a robust coaching conversation. And that coaching conversation will sound very different to somebody you're trying to develop. It might sound like, where to next? How are you going to get there? It might be about their career development. It might be about they want to try new things and stretch. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
And it also reminds me that it might be about what they need to do less of. When you mention the high performer, I like to think of myself as a high performer. I was 29 when I had my first real burnout from work. As I'm listening to you and I'm thinking back to that time, I'm thinking, my gosh, what it would have been like to have a people leader say to me, listen, I recognize I have to give credit. I'm going to jump forward to an experience that I had in an organization where my people leader did pull me aside and she said, hey, listen, I noticed that you're sending emails at really odd hours.
Yeah.
And what I appreciated from that conversation was why are you doing that? And not like in an accusatory way, but what's happening with you? Is your workload okay? I know we tend to give you a lot of projects. Is that okay? Where are you with that? And I appreciated that because, to your point about people staying in performance too long, your high performers, we typically give them more work. They perform more. And there may not be that stopping point for them to say, maybe we do have you do less of all of this. What can we put on your plate that's not a deliverable, but a way for you to learn something new, grow in a way that gives back to you, that's not necessarily like go, go, go.
Well done. Typically, high performers, achievers will never say they're struggling.
Never. I can tell you, never.
That is not in their dictionary. That word is crossed out in their dictionary. So they need to be blessed with somebody who's going, hang on a second, I'm noticing something, or I'm not even noticing something, but let's talk about, you're always go, 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 go. I am curious. And it has to be that non-judgmental, authentic way. I would like to put myself into the high-performing achiever zone. And if anybody came to me and said, hey, let's have a chat about the amount of hours you're working or the times you're sending emails at, I would immediately probably go, oh my God, have I done something wrong?
Yeah.
You need to be very, very careful. And that is why, and something maybe that we haven't touched as much on, but as a leader, you need to understand your people so much. You said you had a language. for your
Yeah,
different people, you need to learn that language so quickly
absolutely. And
and
be
so
fluent.
well.
And one thing I would also posit to that is when we talk about bringing out the best in people, I think sometimes in corporate America, we think the best means high performing. For us, the idea is that we're supposed to have healthy, engaged, and high performing teams. We tend to think that bringing out the best is just the high performing part. We
That's just
forget
wrong.
about the healthy part and the
Yeah,
engaged part. And we look at it through that
yeah.
lens. I like to look at it that way because when I'm looking at high performers, they may be knocking it out of the box, the productivity bucket. But then I say to myself, is this person healthy? Is this person engaged? Do I see joy in them doing their work? A lot of times when we're leading global teams, like in the opposite part, some of my team members have been in India, I'm in the US. So when I look and I see your team's bubble at 11 a.m., my time, I'm like, wait a minute, why are you still online? Because my healthy is starting to go off and say, maybe we need to have a conversation about if you are being the healthiest version, if you're still online at a time that feels super late, even for your region.
I love that. And I love something you said. Does this bring you joy? Does this bring you joy? And so many times as leaders, and by the way, when I say as leaders, I absolutely include myself in all of that because I've done it all. I've made
Yeah.
mistakes. I've learned. I've made some more different mistakes. You'll be glad to know, and learn some more. But we look at people, and because they do a great job, we think, well, they must love it because they're doing a great job.
Yes.
Absolutely. They must be getting joy. They must be getting energized, right? We give them more. No, 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 no. Just because you're amazing at doing something doesn't mean to say that it doesn't drain you.
That's
And
right.
that's where the burnout comes in. If you do stuff that energizes you, great. Gives you joy, great. If you start doing stuff because you have to do it and you become so great at it because you are a high performer and you'll never let the side down, but it drains you, guess what's going to happen? You're going to have nothing to give.
Mm-hmm.
And so regularly, when I sit down with my guys and girls, I ask them, so talk me through what you've done this week. How did you feel? Did you feel good? Did you feel joy? Did you feel drained? Did you feel, I have stuff that I have to do in my job and I have to be brilliant at. I don't enjoy.
Yes.
I want to trade off the politics. I want to trade off spreadsheets, but I can't. So I need to make sure that I do other activities that give me joy to counteract the stuff that doesn't give me joy. Going back to the purpose of a leader coach is to notice, to guide without judgment or prejudice, to maybe ask you some questions that then prompt you to reflect and prompt you to think, oh, that is what others perceive.
Yes. And embedded in there is you have to care, right? You have to care about the person.
You're in the wrong job if you don't care.
That part.
You're in the wrong job. No, seriously, because anybody can drive performance, right? Anybody can sit down and you talk to me about the difference. I can sit down and I go, you've got 5 goals you need to achieve by this date. Boom, off you go. What support do you need? Nothing. Great, go.
Yeah. It's not enough. And I do think a lot of times leaders struggle with the actual conversation, right? So in having worked in L&D, I know that sometimes we focus a lot on the what. We have been telling managers to have coaching conversations. I would even say we might have taught them a model or two along the way. But I would love to hear from you as you think about how you lead coaching conversations. What are some of the questions or techniques that you have found to be particularly powerful in helping people to have these aha moments?
Good question. Like any decent coach, I mix some of the models of pro and grow. I use grow quite a bit, but also some of the NLP techniques. And the words that people are using and the body language, even virtual, they're very telling. If we talk about techniques, then we go into some specific questions. Many years ago, I worked with somebody very wise who said to me, when you coach, do something. So you ask a question and you literally listen actively. You listen because you want to understand. When I first started coaching, I was so keen to give the answers to help
Yes.
people. Now, my technique is I ask a question and I sit back, and my back hits the back of the chair. And that is the signal to my brain to say, and now listen. Unconditionally listen. Because you'll find an answer, but don't think of the answer. Listen to that person. That is technique number one for me. Asking questions to help that person think helps a lot. So making sure that I help them identify what is it not like, what is it specifically that is not working? What is your problem statement?
Yes.
Let's define that and not try to solve 10 problems at the same time. What is specifically, and I am emphasizing the word specifically, because the moment you say specifically, then they become specific.
Yes.
And it helps you to channel your discussion around that specific thing. The other question I use quite often, you get people and you ask them questions, and very often they'll go, but I don't know. I don't know. And, and I know it sounds very cheeky, but I do ask, okay, so let's pretend that you knew. What would you do? If you knew, what would be your answer? I know you don't know, but what if you knew?
Yeah.
It's really interesting what comes out from that conversation. I mean, listen, sometimes people go, well, I don't know. I can't even pretend I know. And, you're coming to a dead end, so you need to change tact in the
Sure.
moment because you need to think on your feet.
I actually love pretend you know. What came to mind for me is when people recognize that there are a lot of unknowns out there and you will never know everything. But if you stop because you don't know, then you will stay stuck. So I love that technique and that question about pretend you know, because pretend you know what the answer is going to be. And you can pretend either way, right? So like, pretend the answer is yes, then what would you do? Pretend the answer is no, then what would you do? And it helps them to navigate both situations in their mind. And then, of course, you might say, which one feels more likely to you? So I think you still give them a way to navigate the conversation and figure out how to think through what could come next. I really do love that. And I did also want to circle back to your first question of having them to get specific.
Yeah.
Because
so important.
It's so important to bring them down to what thing are we solving for? I know I always like to ask people. The first question for me is always, what problem are you trying to solve?
Yeah.
Yeah, specifically, what are you trying to get done? And once we start there, where in that process are you getting stuck? Having people be clear, even asking them questions, that ability to give them clarity is such a powerful part of the conversation.
You would be amazed how many people don't really know what specifically they're struggling with. And that in itself becomes a coaching session. That in itself opens, you think you're going down a certain route and you're going to go completely on a different route. Prepared as a coach, be prepared. Don't go in with any pre-prepared concepts. You're going to go wherever that conversation takes you. And I've got two other things that really work, and that takes us a little more into the NLP zone. When people are stuck and struggling with the answer, I invite them to step away from the situation and become a third person. Pretend you're in a helicopter looking at the situation. You're looking at everything in that situation. And if you want to think one of your friends might be in that situation, what would you say to your friend? Because it touches them. That, sometimes when we are in the weeds of a situation, of a challenge, of a dilemma, coming out of it gives us a different perspective. And that's why you say, as a leader, you shouldn't be in the weeds. You should be out having that bigger picture, because that is going to help you to help other people, right?
Yeah.
And the final one, and this is for particularly underperformance, or not as good performance is people like to be praised and think of good times and have hope. And if we remember what I said, how about if we think about what is right with people, what is good with people versus what is wrong with people? Get them to think of a situation where they've been successful, where they've been amazing, and get them to tell you what made them amazing, and maybe take them away and tell them to move spaces, and you will see a completely different person talking to you.
Agreed. Because part of it is
That's my technique. Those are my techniques.
I love that. What I do love about coaching conversations too, like you said, that question always reminds people that they have been successful. They have overcome. They have pushed through. When they get marred down in what they're currently facing, literally, when is the last time you faced this situation? What did you do then? It's funny. I had somebody coach me just this week. I was struggling with something. They were like, "What did you do the last time got stuck this way?" And I was like, "Oh, I did." And it just reminded me that I could overcome that challenge. I love having that conversation with people using that same technique to say, have you faced something like that before? Because 9 times out of 10, they have. They just need to be reminded that they're capable and that they figured it out before. It might, and they encourage to try it again in this instance.
You can do it. You've got the resources. You've done it before. You can do it. It's not beyond your capability. Remember what you said to me, a leader cares, coach cares. So caring to me is bringing the best out of people and get them to think good thoughts, because of course you're going to get out of that coaching session skipping and going, yes, I'm going to do it. I can do it. This is not going to beat me.
This is not going to beat me. Yeah. I love, see, and look, I'm not even being coached for you right now, and I feel engaged and motivated to go do something great. I do love that. And, you can get it. The appreciation that I personally have for coaching and even for people leadership. People always ask me, why am I so passionate about people leaders? And I tell them it's because I had the benefit of great people leaders early in my career. People who modeled for me behaviors. And so I know what it feels like to have somebody ask me those questions. Like I told you, somebody pulled me aside and said, "Hey, I see emails coming at a crazy hour. I'm concerned. Let's have a conversation. Are you getting enough rest? Are you overstimulated? Do you have too many projects?" I think that is important for people leaders to have, because we can't give what we didn't experience. If we haven't experienced someone pouring into us, it's hard for us to pour into somebody else. And so I'm wondering your thoughts on how important it is, not just for people leaders to develop as coaches, but for us to have our own coaches to help.
Critical. The doctors are the worst to look after their health, and the plumbers are the worst to do their plumbing, right? The coach needs a coach because you need fuel.
Yes.
We're humans, right? We don't run on empty, contrary to popular belief. We need stimulation, we need motivation, we need picking up, because we're humans. We need to practice what we preach. We need to go in a session and be vulnerable, be the coachee, and forget for an hour or 90 minutes that we're coaches, and open our heart and our brain to that conversation in the moment. And that is not going to grow us as coaches. I've got a coach outside the company. I've got people that feed my soul, right? Because it's not just about, can they make me a better coach? It's about, how do I feed myself, my soul? How do I put my oxygen mask on before I go and rescue others and before I go and guide others? Because no matter what we say, being a coach can be draining.
Yes.
So how do you nourish yourself? How do you replenish that? You have a coach, and you have somebody who's going to go, tell me of a time where you've been brilliant, and how did it feel? And what did you do? Oh, brilliant. Okay. Which one of those can you use now in this situation? It sounds very simple, but it can become so powerful if you get the right coach.
I think so. I mean, It's not necessarily about using that experience to have a better coach, but you feeling the experience, going through it and understanding the true benefit, what it's done for you. I think about coaches, whether it's been work, whether it's been personal, the experience of getting unstuck, the experience of having someone facilitate the aha. I appreciate my own personal ahas, right? One of my favorite things about coaching is when you get to the end and you're like, what's one step you can take? What's one tiny thing you can do to move yourself forward? And there's been countless times where I have been stuck in whatever situation and I've been like, now I know what to do. And what I loved about it too, as I think about, so like one of my very first coaching conversations at work, again, simply using the GROW model. She sat down with me, we went through the questions, but I remember I also started to learn how to self-coach. So when I got stuck, I would literally say to myself, okay, what are we trying to accomplish? Like, where are we? What's the real problem? What am I solving for? And I love that because I think when you experience coaching, you are almost training your brain to attack problems in a certain way. You're helping other people to do the same. And if you've never experienced it, you don't know the value of it. But once you do, it's hard not to want to pass it on to other people.
Do you know what? This is one of those disciplines where unless you put your full heart and soul in a coaching conversation, you might as well not do it. We're all made of energy. So that energy exchange in a coaching conversation, in a quality conversation, is unbelievably powerful because you feel that energy and the other person feels your energy.
That is a beautiful place to end our conversation together. But we'll come back at another date and talk about energy because I believe that too. On behalf of our listeners, I do want to thank you for sharing your passion for coaching, for developing, for caring about other people. It is always amazing to hear a people leader lead from that perspective. If you are a listener, I hope you took away that the simplest thing you can do for people is to know who they are, to know what they are like at their best, to pay attention to the signs that they might need and benefit from a dedicated conversation about them, their goals and aspirations. How are they doing, not only in performance, but from a healthy and engaged perspective? Ramona, if someone wanted to reach out to you, would LinkedIn be the best way to do that?
So first of all, I'm going to say thank you for my invite. I loved it. I loved every moment of it. Thank you for the listeners listening. And thank you to you, Camaria. If you want to talk to me, absolutely. Reach out to me on LinkedIn and I will respond.
Love it. So I will put your LinkedIn in the show notes. Thank you for being a guest. And for the listeners, I do hope that you take this away. If there's somebody in your network that you think can benefit from the conversation, please do share this conversation with them. So on behalf of Ramona and myself, thank you for listening to Manager to Manager. Please take care of yourself and each other until we meet again.